Hi, guys. Welcome to A Little Help for Our Friends, a podcast for people with loved ones struggling with mental health. Hey, little helpers. It's Dr. Kibby here. Before we dive into this episode, I wanted to tell you how I could help you navigate the mental health or addiction struggles of the people you love. Cool of Mine is the online coaching platform and community that I built to support you in the moment when you need it the most, like having hard conversations, asserting your needs, or setting boundaries. Even if you're just curious and want to chat about it, book a free call with me by going to the link in the show notes or going to coolamind.com, KULAMIND.com, and click Get Started. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hey, little helpers. Today I'm going to talk about how did I get from chasing toxic relationships and even a toxic marriage to what I feel like is the perfect marriage. And it's an interesting topic for me because I actually had to reflect and think about this. It wasn't just something that just occurred to me. Uh, in the past couple years, Jacqueline and I had talked about on this podcast. We talked about our relationships, like crazy ones from the past, or the ones that we were getting in or getting out of, and we talked about a process. And it almost kind of seemed like at some point we popped into our dream relationship. Like everything worked out, right? And a couple of you reached out and asked, like, how did that happen? How did you break out of old toxic habits or chasing the wrong guys and finding something that's happy, safe, and healthy? At the time, I couldn't really answer it. Like when it was all happening, we didn't really have a good answer for how this happened. Um, we could kind of in hindsight look back and say, oh yeah, I found this guy, so it took a little while for me to really think about like what were the major insights or shift in my perspective that helped me find a healthy relationship. Like it wasn't really easy because it was like all my life I just had been in some really really good people. I dated some really good people, but the relationships felt really unhealthy, right? They didn't feel like the one, or I ended up obsessing over them or getting really anxious about them, wondering if they liked me, feeling like I had to like fix it or change it, right? So there was always like this angst in my relationships before. And I, with my parents being divorced and having a really hard time with childhood trauma, I always kind of assumed that relationships were always going to feel like that. They were always going to feel stressful and hard and lonely. Um, it was an unconscious thought, like relationship and marriage is just going to be hard and awful. So it shocked myself when I got into something that makes me feel really fulfilled and is like, you know, the end of all the Disney movies, like living happily ever after. And at the time that it happened, at the time that my husband and I got together, it felt like, oh, the universe gave it to me. Like, just something out of my hands that it was just meant to be. And it just landed in my lap and I just went along with it. So it really felt at the time like not something that I did consciously, not something that I made happen, but it just happened to me. Um, but actually, when I look back and I really think about it, there were a couple of major turning points where I basically had a therapy breakthrough. I had breakthroughs of like, oh, this is not working, and this is what I have to change. This is the way I have to see things if I want to actually get what I want and heal. So I wanted to talk about those. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the 5 mindset shifts that really broke me out of toxic relationships and gave me the healthy marriage that I'm in now. I'll list them out and then I'll go into each one. So, the 4 mindset shifts that totally transformed the way I approach relationships and gave me the perfect marriage that I'm in now is 1, I needed a partner who could take care of me if I had cancer. 2, I need to stop trying to heal childhood wounds by repeating old patterns. 3, I have to choose a co-parent, a good co-parent who I could raise kids with. And 4, I needed a partner who was good at handling logistics with me. So those were the 4 different mindset shifts that led me to the one. And it's not really what you expect because, you might think, oh, it's, I have to find my soulmate that I feel amazing with, and that it's like you see them and and blah, blah, blah. But those were my 4 deal breakers. And so I'll go into each one and why. So for the first one, first mindset shift is wanting to find a partner who could take care of me when in sickness and health, when I had cancer, when I'm old, when something goes wrong. That shift happened when I was in my 20s and I was dating, anyone. I was just dating someone fun, right? So people that I like, people I thought I was handsome, right? How you date in your 20s. But when I was like 21, 22, my dad was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a really deadly cancer, and he didn't have long to live, and it was horrible. He got the diagnosis and died 3 years later. And I mean, it was just heartbreaking on many levels, but watching him go through these horrible treatments. I mean, horrible. I mean, he also had like a surgery on his leg at the same time. Um, he had a lot of things going on, and then he had this like really intense chemo and stem cell treatment. Like they were trying to throw everything they could, but he was declining, and he was in and out of the hospital all the time. And there was one time, like one of those years, where he was in the hospital for more days than not. And watching him go through that, I also watched my stepmom be by his side. She was amazing. She she raised 2 kids, 2 little kids at that time, went back and forth from home to the hospital, took care of him, was like a hawkeye on him. If any of the nurses or doctors or messing something up or hurting him or getting confused, she was there to correct them, and she took in what the doctors are saying and wrestled my stubborn dad to do the things that he needed to do. She was incredible. She was this amazing ideal of a caregiver. And I remember even at 21 looking at that and thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen, right? We don't talk about it in the Disney movies or the rom-coms, but when you think about who you want to spend your life with, who you want to partner with, whether it's marriage or, otherwise, most likely when we get older, we're going to have problems or we're going to go through hardship. We're going to get cancer. We're going to give birth, and it's probably going to be really hard, and get old. And it's weird to date and think who's going to be a good caregiver, like who's going to be a good nurse in the future. But that is so, so key, because at the end of the day, usually it's your partner, your spouse, who is there in the hospital with you, right? Like, even just like legally, they're the ones who are allowed in the hospital room. So they're usually the ones there, like bringing you lunch or making sure that your IVs are still in, right? They're there with you. And I thought, okay, I have to find someone who I can trust with that type of responsibility over me, and vice versa, someone that I would be happy to care for in that moment. And you think of it like, I think people, when they think, oh, how do I find the one? Is it the exciting one that I feel passion for, or the nice guy who I feel the ick for, like the boring one? Someone who just loves me, but I'm not that attracted to, or whatever. That's what I'm saying. It's not just pick the nice guy that, you're not so attracted to. There's not a lot of passion. Pick the nice guy or girl who has the strength of character to take care of you when times are hard. That's not just nice or sweet or loving, but that's someone who has the fortitude to see the person that they love struggle with illness and still say, I got to get the kids to school. Very hard to find. Very, very hard to find. So I understand that. And it's hard to just figure that out when you're like on date two. But, it's just like watching how someone handles stress, handles you being in distress, you being incapacitated, and then seeing how they show up. And really, I feel like I learned how to think to myself, like, when things are hard, when I need to go into surgery or get treatment, or when I'm scared, how does that person hold me in that? Do I feel safe, or am I worrying about their well-being and making sure that they don't kind of fall apart, which would be so stressful. And sadly enough, I made that decision. I kind of like in my 20s and 30s kept an eye out for who can take care of me when I had cancer, hypothetically. And then I got cancer. And I am so grateful that I had a partner who was strong and like held up the household, took care of our son, went to his job somehow, came with me to every chemo treatment and made me feel safe. And it's crazy to think that, so that's such a big part of marriage in that time, right? Like part of our marriage wasn't going on dates or like having sex or whatever. It is sitting there while I'm getting an IV drip of chemo. And because I picked someone who I felt comfortable doing that with me, there were times where even during the cancer treatment, it felt fun. Like I have like positive memories of Alex and I like raiding the hospital kitchen for the free ice cream, right? So there's, who can make you feel cared for and also like make you feel loved and safe when shit hits the fan. So find someone who you'd want to take care of you when you have cancer, or if we have cancer. And then the second one is, this one is actually a tricky one. The second one was how, when every one of us have childhood wounds, right? Things that their parents didn't do, pains, traumas, difficult relationships that you wish were different growing up. And a lot of people try to heal those wounds through their adult relationships. Totally normal, right? This is why we end up with, the one that reminds you of your dad or the one that reminds you of your toxic ex, right? And you're like, why do I keep choosing the same bad person for me? And the reason why we do that is because with trauma, we sometimes repeat old traumas or situations that remind you of the trauma so that you can feel like you have control over it, feel like you could rewrite the narrative or actually change the outcome, right? So this is a really common pattern of people who have experienced trauma in childhood. And this is it's something that I fell into as well, even though this is what I'm studying and what I specialize in as a psychologist. But I was dating people who reminded me of my mother. And maybe they weren't exactly like my mother, but the dynamic that they and I had reminded me of the one I had with my mom. A lot of that was me. Like I came in and kind of co-created that in a way to feel in control, in a way to change the narrative, in a way to like have it turn out differently than the way I felt with my mom. All unconsciously, of course. It's not like I went around being like, oh, it reminds me of my mother. This is so great. But I ended up with these people. They felt like natural to me. They felt familiar. They felt comfortable. And it really kind of fits into what you believe love is, right? Love feels like this. But my mindset shift was really around like, that doesn't work. It doesn't work to recreate your old traumas and to try to change the outcome. What works better is to just find someone who actually has the thing that you're looking for, that satisfies that need, and already has that outcome that you've always wanted. So for example, with my ex-husband, he felt very much like how I was with my mom, where he was fun and charming and almost like childlike. That was his charm. He was just like bouncing off the walls and, like no self-consciousness, which was lovely in many ways. Like he just was in the moment at all times. Um, Very social, very fun. But in exchange, like I was the caretaker. I was like the adult in the relationship. That's how I felt, at least. And that's how I felt with my mom, where I was like the serious one that got things done, and they were the fun one. And that felt really normal. That felt like, well, if I'm the serious career oriented one, it makes sense that I'm with someone who's like more fun. But the pain was still there. The pain that I felt with my mom was still there with my husband, where it was like I was resentful that I didn't feel cared for. I was resentful that I didn't feel like I could rely on them. That they were fun, but if I went away, for a weekend or something, I wouldn't trust that they held down the fort, got a job when they needed to, you know, take care of me when I had cancer, right? So I it was this cycle of like them feeling like my child and me being like serious and responsible and almost critical, and then me getting resentful, and then them feeling like, like Kibby's always mad at me, and there's nothing I could do that will make her happy, so they felt bad about themselves, right? So there's this like cycle of like parentifying myself in these relationships. And I think there was the unconscious part of me felt like, well, if he just finally shaped up and got a job and was responsible and felt like a partner, I would get that feeling that I've always wanted in my childhood, which is like, oh, I finally have a parent. I finally have an adult in the room that's not just me. And whenever I didn't get that, there was this deep sense of hopelessness and despair. So if you're in a relationship that reminds you of an old childhood wound and it doesn't turn out, and like there's a hiccup or there's a fight or something, and you just like have this deep pain, like this despair of my life is hopeless, this is hopeless, like we're broken, right? I remember this feeling. It was just like this deep depression and emptiness. That's, and it's like maybe a bigger feeling than what the fight calls for. Like it's almost an overreaction as you could think about it. But I would feel this deep despair whenever my ex didn't like, lied about getting a job, or just didn't get a job, or spent all this time doing drugs or something like that. I would have this deep, deep despair, like I was betrayed. And that feeling is, this was my hope to fix the wrongs in my past. And it didn't work out. I didn't fix it. And it'll never be fixed, which is actually something that I should have sat with and accepted. Like, yeah, I didn't get what I needed from my mom growing up. I need to grieve that. I need to, instead of making this guy, change the narrative, I need to grieve that I didn't get what I needed. But I was avoiding it, right? I was just, instead of just like really leaning into it, I was just like, well, I'll just make sure he gets a job. I'll do this so he gets a job. So I kept trying to chase the Band-Aid, but it never would work, right? So when I got out of that, I mean, that mindset shift of like not chasing your old demons, like it didn't click right away, because I actually, right after I got a divorce, I dated someone who was the exact same, honestly. It was a doctor who was an alcoholic, had like a childlike attitude towards him, was like fun and charming, but also kind of unreliable, like looked up to me as like, someone who's responsible. And it was like all of the things that I was familiar with, all the pieces of that blueprint. But then it just blew apart colossally. I'll tell that story in a different episode. That was like a crazy, crazy, crazy time. But it really just blew up in my face. And at that point, I remember having this thought of like, I'm done with this. I am done chasing this kind of guy. I'm done with this kind of relationship. This is so stupid. I was like angry with myself. I was like, what am I doing? Dating these childlike people. And I think that being done feeling is what really prompted my mindset shift of like, no more man children, no more dating man child. I'm gonna date someone who actually feels like an adult, who feels like my partner. And so burning out from my old toxic patterns actually helped me say, all right, if I'm not, I'm going to change my tactic entirely and find someone who actually just from the day one, from the moment I start dating them, they are fixed, not someone that I have to fix, right? But is a healed version of the type that I'm looking for. Super helpful. So the third huge change in my perspective was wanting a partner who felt like home. It's interesting that um, talking to my therapy patients who are trying to date or figure out who to marry, who the one is, um, we all come in with our preconceived notions of what it means like to feel in love. And the more I do this work, the more I realize there's not one way to feel in love, right? And like we've been told a certain thing through the rom-coms and Disney that it's, like the music starts playing, our eyes get big, right? This kind of like falling in love infatuation feeling. And then it gets confusing when you're at the point where you are choosing who you want to spend the rest of your life with. And that might feel different to different people, right? And they might not realize that they want a different feeling than that sparkly whatever for their life partner. But it's confusing because it feels wrong, or you're like, is this the right one? Is this the right feeling? And I shifting out of those toxic dynamics that I would fall into, where I would kind of end up being feeling like a parent or a caretaker. It was hard because in those dynamics, like when I meet someone like that, even today, even when a friend that feels like that same kind of dynamic of like a parent and child, or like me, the serious one that does all the stuff, and then the fun one who is the charming one, I feel a certain way. I feel this draw. I feel this excitement, this infatuated feeling. And has landed me in business relationships that felt similar and haven't gone well, friends that felt similar and haven't gone well. So then when you're stuck with this, like, oh, this is what love feels like, this excitement, this infatuation, but I've been burned. Now what? Right? What do I shift to? Do I feel that way about the right one, quote, right one, and it just turns out differently? Or should I never trust that feeling again? Right? So I'm seeing also this with my friends who are dating and they've been hurt by someone they've been really in love with. And now when they feel like chemistry or that same feeling, they don't trust it. They're like, oh, I know where this is going. This is probably a bad sign that they're toxic. And I just, I can't trust myself not to get into these toxic dynamics. So that was a really interesting question for me. Is like, what do I want to feel when I'm with my partner, my lifelong partner, my husband? What is it supposed to feel like? And I don't know if I chose this consciously, but now that like in hindsight, one of the mindset shifts was instead of feeling like this project, this feeling of chase, this feeling of like that achy, obsessive, I'm thinking about them all the time. How do I get them to like me? We're almost there, but we have a barrier. If they only saw me for who I was, and then I'll finally feel like happy, right? This like chase feeling, infatuation feeling. I had to learn that that's not that wasn't healthy. That wasn't right. That's actually a bad sign. That's a sign that there was something missing about the relationship that I was had hope that I could fill in some way or that it would resolve itself. So I I used to think that falling in love or being in love was like a dopamine rush, right? Like the pain and withdrawal, and then like, yes, I've won. I've like, oh, the honeymoon, I've won them over. But and then I was always thinking that, ones that felt easy or relationships that felt easy or comfortable or secure didn't have that chase. Like there's nothing to chase. It's just right here. That was like boring or I would get the ick. But instead, I learned to really appreciate that feeling of absence of chase. And what that actually feels like to me is feeling like home, right? It's not boring, right? The difference of boring versus home. Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm just like piecing it together now. I feel like I have a lot of excitement in my life because my husband feels like home to me. And it helps that we were best friends. So I automatically felt that. And what that meant for me was I trusted that he knew and saw all the different sides of me and the ups and downs of life. And still loved me, was still always there, still was a person that I can go to, right? And also, I had this feeling of like resting with him. It was a really good sign for me before, like right before we got together, when I realized that what we love to do is deal with stress by hanging out together. Like our time together, our quality time felt like recharging for me. Felt like I was restoring something. It still does. Like whenever I'm like, oh, I've been so busy or things are stressful, I don't feel good. I just like want to be around him because that feels restorative. It feels like I could kind of like let my guard down and rest and just turn off, right? I could even go inward and we could just keep each other company in that feeling of resting, right? That feeling that I feel now, like this, I'm in my chair and like a cozy blanket and I could just like kind of like let it all hang out, right? That was the feeling of home. Um, Instead of having to say, well, I gotta consciously perform or consciously do something in order for this to work, in order for me to feel secure that this person will stay, that I'll still have this relationship. Right. So that feeling of home was so important. And I remember even just like a couple of stressful days, this was like weeks before we actually got together, where we just had like an intense time. We were moving to different Airbnbs. It was COVID. And I- we both at the end of like a really stressful week, we just both wanted to like hang out with each other and just I remember that feeling. We were both on my couch and I was like, oh, so glad we could just chill tonight. What do you want to watch? And so we like watched TV and we just like debriefed and talked about all the stuff that was happening and just processed together, right? It was just this like like letting it all hang out with each other. Um and that was so liberating. And so I think that's now I'm talking through it. That's what the thing that feels different from like boring, right? Someone who feels safe and boring versus like feels like home. When I feel like home, I feel liberated. So I feel it's kind of exciting. I could think about and process all the stuff that I've learned or gone through. We could be silly, we could be serious, I could cry, right? There's a lot of range in that. There's a lot of variety and range and freedom in the feeling of home, right? But boring, like relationships that felt like, okay, this is safe and he's nice and whatever, felt flat, right? It wasn't a range, it wasn't like all these different sides. It was like it was like it discouraged different sides, right? It discouraged like a more energetic side, or it was just like more gray and flat than it did feel like, oh, all right, I'm home. I could do whatever. So I think the home feeling is like having a variety of different authentic expressions of myself and our relationship, and also still having the safety that it's there. Right? We could play, we could fight, we could be upset, we could be hungry, we could whatever. We could go through hardship, we could go through cancer, and it'll be there. Right? So, a feeling of home and looking for a partner that makes you feel at home is huge, was such a game changer for me. And so no matter what hardships we've been through, because yes, life is hard, right? Like having kids is hard, going through cancer is hard, being an adult's hard, like moving is hard. All life will throw you challenges, but if you have someone that anchors you and makes you feel home through it, you'll always feel at home. You always will feel that feeling of stability and foundation, even when life is hard, right? Like, how exhausting would it be if I felt like I had to perform and chase and prove I'm worthy of my partner when I'm also trying to do the same at work and I'm trying to figure out how to be a partner, right? There's so much like challenge that eh, to not have a partner as a safe space is like, I can imagine you just feel stressed all the time. Your nervous system will never get to relax. So having a partner that feels like home. And then the fourth major mindset shift, shift that was, it kind of hit me as a lightning bolt and saved me. It really like this was a moment of insight that just like bam, like came to me and totally changed the way I saw who do I choose as the one, who do I marry, was I want to select a good co-parent. It's got to be a good co-parent for different reasons. One is that you're going to be attached to this person for the rest of your life. And two, your kids are going to be half them, if, biologically, but if they will learn your partner's values, they will learn their mannerisms. And so when you think about selecting your husband or wife or whatever, how they would be as your co-parent forever is a huge change of perspective, right? So, for example, when I was thought about my ex-husband, I thought, okay, we have a lot of good things about a relationship. We get along in many ways, and a lot of ways we don't. And I think he's going to be a good dad. Like I really did have faith that he would love our hypothetical children and he, raise them right, like they'd be safe and everything like that. But I was just stuck there. I was stuck like, okay, well, that means that I should marry him. That means I should have a kid with him. But then when things got really hard in my marriage, and I thought to myself, like, okay, I might have to get a divorce. We might divorce one day. This might not work out. I kind of accepted that. Of course, it was hard, but I accepted that. And then I thought, well, I should, like I really want a child and he'd be a good dad. So let's just, you know, go forward with this and make a family, make kids. I didn't plan to have kids and then get divorced, but I thought to myself, like, oh, maybe this might be the outcome. It would be terrible, but that would be the outcome. We might split up. And then I thought, well, if I, have a child out of that'd be a blessing. I'm a child of divorce, so I'm like, well, that would still be wonderful in some ways to like make a child, even if we don't work out as a romantic couple. But then this was like days before I had the embryo transferred into me. So before like the end of the IVF cycle where they put in the embryo and like hope I get pregnant, I just had this like realization that, oh my God, we might get divorced, but these kids are forever, right? Having a kid with someone is the most permanent decision you can make. No matter what happens, you have made another person with that person. Right? You could split up, you could get divorced, you could separate, you could live different places with your romantic partner, but if you make a child with someone, you are connected to that person forever. And if you think about that, that's like you have to figure out, even if you're split up, you have to figure out holidays. Who gets what holiday? You have to make decisions about education together, disciplining, right? You have to co-parent with this person forever. Even if you're so far done with that relationship, there's something that always has to bring you back to interact with that person. So the question really is like, instead of like, who would I want to marry? Who do I fall in love with? It's like, who do I want to talk to and deal with for the rest of my life? Right? Um, and my current husband was someone who I was always connected to. I always, even as soon as we met and became friends when we were 18, we've gone through ups and downs, lived on opposite sides of the country, um, been really terrible versions of ourselves, especially in our 20s. But I always wanted him in my life in any way, whether it's to update him, I wish him well, like there was always like he felt like my constant in my life. So the idea that we would have kids and I would be connected to him forever, I was like, cool, I can do that. I can, even if things go horribly, which would break my heart, but I would still be okay if, like, in 20 years I still have to figure out holidays with him, right? So, I mean, that's a grim look, but this is all like the most realistic picture of how I selected um my partner that I'm really happy with. So it's just like it's less of the fairy tale and more of like this is what this is what a marriage looks like, and this is what you're really selecting. So it's like, who do I want to be connected to forever? And then another piece of that co-parenting thing is you will have children, hopefully with this person, if you decide to. Of course, you can always adopt one, but that person, that kid is going to be something that you love more than like anything in the world, right? This is the person you love the most, this child or these children. And you're going to be so invested in the way they grow up and the way they develop and the personality and the things that getting to know them, right? There's just so much richness in your relationship with your children. And your co-parent, that like that person's other parent is going to live on in that person, right? In your child. So not only do you have to talk to, let's say, your co-parent about like, what school do we send them to, but you also watch your son become like your husband, right? Like the mannerisms, the you know, his ear shape, his hair, his tolerance for frustration, his organizational skills. Like you're just watching like the seeds of your partner grow in this person that you love so much, which is amazing when it's a good relationship. But if it's someone that you don't fundamentally like or respect, that could actually get really hard. It could get really conflicting when you watch your child become a person that you hate, right? And not only that, they start to learn some of the values. If they're still involved in that in your kid's life, they are learning the values and approach to life, how to work with stress, how to overcome challenges, how to treat other people. They're learning through both of you, right? And if I don't fundamentally respect how that other person like goes about life, I, I don't want that around my precious child, right? But if you select a partner just because they're hot or because they're rich or they said they loved you a lot and they want to get married and you're not sure about them, you kind of hate them, but like whatever, though that's the choice. That's a choice that you make, is that you're choosing that piece of making it happen, but that the long term, that's the consequence. Some people, and many people, are in this situation. If you are, I mean, it is difficult, but definitely possible. It's just that if you're in a position of selecting someone and figuring out who you want to be with, think about like, would I want that person become a little person and then shape the future of my children, right? Um, that was one thing that I feel kind of ashamed to say it, but when I really thought about my husband, and the hard part with my ex was I wasn't sure what challenges or things I didn't like about a relationship were due to this being a hard time. Like he was just burnt out, he was unemployed, he was struggling. So I didn't know if it was like a phase or if it's like who he is, right? And then over time, I realized that the phase, the hard time, like him not having a job or the way he handled finances or, responsibility, he was making consistent decisions that caused what I saw as problems, right? And then I was like, oh, wait, he keeps making decisions based on these principles. These are the kind of values that our kids would grow up with. This is what they would learn is right. So, for example, something that I found really hard with him was that he um, would prioritize comfort, his own comfort, over doing something that's challenging but important. So even just like applying for a job, I would watch him constantly say, I want to apply for a job. I know this is something that I should do. I know this is something that's good for our family, and blah, blah, blah. There was all these like logical reasons why getting a job was a good thing. But then when he would come to it, it would be so anxiety provoking that he would just like not do it. And I was like, okay, fine. Many people do that. Because there are people whose philosophies are like enjoy life, have more fun, like go to the fun in life, relax, have other people do the work, right? Or like other people will step in when you don't want to, this is uncomfortable for you. And I know that that's a value, and there's a lot of people who live very happy lives like that, but I just first of all, it just like put a lot on me. So practically speaking, I was really stressed and annoyed. But also I thought, I don't want my kids to learn this. I want my kids to sit down with themselves, think through what is right for me and my family, whether it's where they move, where they, if they get married, what job they choose, making life decisions, and then willing to do the hard thing that it takes to get there, right? Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's easier just to hang out and smoke some weed, play video games, like I want my kids to learn that you have to earn the things that you want, and it's going to be hard and they're not going to like it, but they have to work and accept their discomfort in order to get the things that they want, right? So my husband now shares the same value. We're on the same plane with that. A little bit too much, like we struggle a little bit too much, but I respect that in him. Not everyone does, and that's fine, but that's something that I want my kids to learn. And so when you're looking at someone, you think to yourself, would I want this person to shape the character and value system of my kids? Right? And I want to be clear here too, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be perfect or you have to agree with everything they do, right? Of course, there's going to be, parts of their values or the way they do things that piss you off or you wish that your kids didn't learn. Of course, we're individuals, but at the fundamental core, like how kids shape the world, like are approaching the world, are you aligned on that? That's a weird question to ask and ask yourself while you're just dating someone, but like it's important. It's really important. And it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. It doesn't matter what the values are. Some people value power and they want to be a power couple and they want their kids to be the kings of the world and be the CEOs of something. And if they're aligned, that's your partner. But if if you value ambition and, power and productivity and the other one doesn't, then then you could ask yourself, can I respect if my kid was like this? Right? Do I respect that difference enough that if my kid grew up to be more of a chiller, more someone who like relaxes and enjoys life than works hard, can I still respect that? You might not like it, but can you be like, all right, love you anyway? um, so who do you want your co-parent to be? That was like a big thing. And the last mindset shift that really landed me an A+ husband was I want to select a partner who's good at handling logistics with me. That is so unsexy. That is so not romantic, right? But it is crazy how much logistics and practical day-to-day adulting factors into a marriage. So I would say that when I look at my relationship now or my life now, like 80% of my interaction with my husband is about like figuring out the day-to-day logistics. who's going to make breakfast? Who's making the income? How do we spend our money? Who's going to buy groceries? Who's picking them up from school if they're called out sick? How are we going to plan holiday travel? Who are we going to spend holidays with? Right? All these, and that's like down to like who's going to open up kayak.com and find the flights, right? That is so much of marriage. I used to think that it used to be like romantic gestures or sex or I don't know, like where you travel together or whatever. Like, do we love the same hobbies? Like, no, it's like logistics is a big part of family life and partnership. I think that is why it's so helpful to like have some kind of shared life, like living together or doing something together so you could see what that's like together. But it almost is like if you think about that you are building a family together, whatever that means. And that's kind of like building a business together. It's building a project. It's like you and I are going to be partners on this. And I'm going to have some roles and do things, and you're going to have some roles and do other things, right? And how are we going to figure it out together? And what I mean by like what does it look like to do logistics is do we communicate well about that? Do we have a clear understanding of who does what? If it's not clear, do we have a good system for figuring that out? Um, do things get done when we work together? Right? That was something that really surprised me with my ex, where we had all the other things, like we could laugh, we, got along, we had a lot of similar interests, but the day-to-day work of life was a disaster. And I was always anxious about that. Like, I mean, the kind of the stereotypical, I had a lot of the emotional labor figuring out when do we get dinner? Do we have to repair the roof? All that stuff. And then to delegate and work with him like a business partner was so hard. Like we just didn't click that way, where I'd say, hey, can you handle this? Well, actually, first I'll probably just get resentful that he didn't think to initiate on stuff. And then I would just be resentful. And then finally I would learn to ask and be like, do you mind doing I don't know, like doing the laundry, taking this, letter over to the office, blah, blah, blah. And then he'd say, yeah, sure. And he would go. And then I would have to ruminate over whether it was done, because 50% of the time it wasn't done and I wouldn't know, right? I would be like, oh, can you do the laundry, or can you send this important piece of paper over to our managers or whatever? And then several weeks later, I'll be like, hey, did you do this? What happened with that? And he would be like, oh, whoops, I didn't. So I always had this anxiety of like, logistics can't get done if if I'm like giving him stuff to do. So it was just so exhausting, and that's where all these like tiny resentments and fights happen, is like who's going to do what? Who's going to take care of this? And if you don't have a clear system of working with that with your partner, it makes life so much harder, right? Because just the logistics of a marriage and having kids is like so hard, right? Like if you picture like, I'm going to go to the grocery store, or I'm going to go to school, or I'm going to go out the door, right? Logistics are you put on your shoes, make sure you have your phone and wallet, and get out the door. With a kid, you do all that, and then you have a kid who goes, I don't want to put on socks. And then when you try to put on socks, he's like rolling around, like, and then screaming. And then you have to like bargain with a cookie. I mean, this is literally what happened this morning. Bargain with a cookie. If you get in the stroller, I'll give you a cookie, right? So the logistics become like 10 times harder. And I am so grateful every day that it's easy with my husband. I mean, life is hard, but the moments when he could go, okay, tap out, I got this. Or he goes, hey, do you mind if I take a rest and you do that? And are you doing this? Like today he has swim class, and we just figured out like, oh, he's going to take him to swim class and what that means, right? Whew. I mean, I'm just really lucky that I have a partner who's willing to like do so much, like take initiative and actually do the work. And, um, like we really divide the emotional labor, but we also are able to work through logistic or communication hiccups without a huge blow up, right? Because if you're arguing over who's doing what while a kid is like rolling around, not screaming about not wanting to put on a sock, then you're pretty screwed and it's really stressful. So have someone who's good at logistics. And that is, I'm thinking about it, like all these mindset shifts are really like shifting from this like fantasy, young, infatuating, like Bridgerton kind of feeling about love and what makes someone right. And usually that is just like this feeling of like you're all consumed by that person and thinking about this person. And then the huge mindset shift was like, no, this is going to be a practical life partner. Can they handle when I get sick or they get sick? Can they handle raising kids with me? Can they handle booking travel with me? Right? And can they give me already by default something that I've always needed in my childhood, something that I felt was missing and that I'm scared of having, right? Like lack of, I was so scared of all the lack of trust and reliability and having someone that's just reliable, not someone I had to convince to be reliable, but it's just reliable. That was a huge mindset shift for me. And literally every day I feel grateful. So, I'd love to hear what you guys think about what mindset shifts or decisions that led you to your partner or relationships that felt really good to you. I'm so curious if it is just me. But thank you so much for listening to my my rant about how much I love my husband and why. But I am always fascinated by like how do we actually find and build healthy relationships? And it's not always what we think at first. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. And if you enjoyed listening to this, please send this to a friend. Having more people hear this and be part of our community is really something that I value. I want us to grow as a community because there's so many people out there who feel similarly to us, like people who struggle with relationships or mental health, and it's such a lonely feeling. So if you just send this to someone who's struggling to find, figure out like, should I marry this person or how do I find the right one? Like send this to them and see if it jogs some, jog some ideas. And if you can, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify would be great, or Apple Podcasts. And please let me know what you want to listen to. If you ever want to reach out, you could always email me at Kibby, Kibby, at coolamind.com, KULAMIND.com, or you could find me on my now personal Instagram. It's at Dr. Kibby, at DRKIBBY on Instagram. So I really want to hear from you guys. I love you all, and talk soon. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the host of this podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information purposes only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial, informational purposes only, and do not constitute the practice of any medical or any professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The host does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast. And information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Thank you.